Ladies, and what if I told you that silence and distance are the most powerful responses to pain, especially when it comes from someone you once loved? Today, let's dive into the topic of emotional self-protection after betrayal and how choosing peace over reaction can completely shift your healing journey. If you've ever been hurt and didn't get the apology you deserved, this message is for you. You'll walk away stronger, clearer, and more grounded in your worth. So hit that subscribe button and join me, because your healing starts right here. When pain knocks at your door without warning, the first instinct is to react. The heart races, the tears burn, and your mind goes to war with itself. You want to scream, to demand answers, to make someone see what they've broken inside of you. You want to pour your truth into every space that might carry it back to them. But what if I told you that the most powerful thing you can do is stay silent? Not because you're weak, not because you don't have something to say, but because your peace is worth more than a reaction. Because explaining yourself to someone who already decided to hurt you is like whispering into a storm. They won't hear it, and you'll only exhaust your soul trying. So instead of fighting to be understood, you rise without sound. And there's a silence that doesn't come from fear. It comes from strength, from deep inner knowing. It's the kind of silence that builds a wall between you and the chaos without you ever lifting a brick. It's painful at first because it feels like you're swallowing your own voice, biting your tongue while your heart bleeds. But that silence becomes your armor. You start to realize that the noise was never for you. It was always to distract you from yourself. You don't need to explain why you hurt. You don't need to announce your healing. The silence becomes a place of power, where your spirit starts to rebuild piece by piece, and in that quiet space, something shifts. You start to hear yourself again. And he expected a reaction. He expected you to spiral, to fight, to fall apart just loud enough for him to feel important. But you didn't give him that satisfaction. You didn't give him your breakdown. You gave him distance. You gave him an empty space where your energy used to be. And that's when he felt the difference, not in your words, but in your absence. That absence is not just a gap. It's a message that says, you don't get to break me and then watch me fall. It says, you are no longer invited into the places where I keep my softness. Your silence became the line he could never cross again, and it hurts to keep it all in. It hurts to sit in silence with your own storm. But that pain births something sacred, self-respect. Every time you resist the urge to call, to argue, to defend yourself, you reclaim a little piece of your power, because reactions are expensive, and you've paid enough already. You've already paid in sleepless nights, in words you can't take back, in energy that never got returned. Now you protect your peace like a locked room, and it's not cold, it's necessary. You've learned that not everyone deserves access to your unfiltered emotion. You've learned that peace and silence are sisters, and sometimes silence is the only language that holds truth. It doesn't lie, it doesn't exaggerate, it just exists, loud and aching, but honest. When you choose not to speak, you give yourself the chance to actually listen to your own hurt, your own healing, your own intuition. And that's where the real answers are, not in someone else's apology, not in their explanation, but in your own quiet knowing. The kind of knowing that doesn't ask for closure because it has already closed the door. The kind of knowing that trusts, even when it trembles, that whispers, you are worth more than this. And there's danger in silence, not because it harms, but because it disarms. It confuses the one who thought they had power over your emotions. It unsettles the person who expected you to unravel for their entertainment. They don't know what to do with your stillness. They don't know how to handle your boundaries. And that's exactly where your strength lives, in your refusal to make them comfortable while you suffer, in your quiet exit that doesn't need to slam a door, in your ability to walk away without making a scene, because you know your worth doesn't need an audience to shine. And you begin to understand that silence is not the absence of a voice. It's the presence of a choice to not let someone's cruelty shape your identity, a choice to not repeat the same patterns that left you drained, a choice to stop showing up in spaces where you are only seen when you are hurting. And that choice, it's powerful. It's the kind of power that doesn't need to prove itself, the kind of power that doesn't chase clarity from someone who lives in confusion. You choose yourself without needing to explain why, and that's where your healing takes root. And it's not easy to sit in that silence, especially when your heart wants answers, especially when your mind keeps replaying what happened, hoping that if you just think about it one more time, it'll all make sense. But healing doesn't happen in the explanation. It happens in the decision to stop asking why. Some things broke you because they were meant to show you what you deserve. Some endings weren't about closure, they were about protection. And your silence, it's not a void, it's a shield. A gentle, powerful shield that says, "You cannot reach me like that anymore." And in the stillness, you finally begin to feel everything you were running from. The disappointment, the betrayal, the sting of knowing you gave love and received pain in return. And even though it hurts, it also frees you because you are finally facing it instead of fighting it. And once you feel it fully, it starts to lose its grip. You start to find yourself again beneath all that grief. You start to breathe again. Not because someone came back, but because you came back to you. You didn't explode, you didn't collapse, you stood still and you listened to your soul. That is real survival. And you don't need to yell to be heard. You don't need to fight to be remembered. The ones who truly see you feel your silence the loudest, and those who don't, they were never really listening anyway. So you stop wasting your voice on ears that were never open. You stop offering your heart to hands that only know how to drop it. And that's how the healing begins. Not with noise, not with revenge, but with the quiet decision to protect your peace at all costs. The most dangerous game was never about hurting them back. It was about rising so silently that they don't even hear you heal. And there comes a moment when your heart is bleeding, but you refuse to let anyone see you crawl. You sit in the middle of your own storm, asking yourself why love had to come dressed as pain. You question everything, your worth, your choices, your softness. But deep down, you know the most dangerous thing you can do now is not fight for what left, not cry for what stayed too long just to hurt you. You step back, you pause, you gather every broken piece of yourself and say, "I don't have to win him, I just have to reclaim me." That is the beginning of a different kind of power, one that whispers instead of screams, and that silence becomes your protection. And it's easy to get caught in the trap of needing to be understood, needing to prove how deeply you loved, how badly you were hurt. You want to show the pain so someone else will carry it. But you quickly learn, your pain isn't currency, it's sacred, and not everyone deserves to witness it. So you hold it close and carry it with grace. You walk away from the need to be seen by someone who never really looked, and that's the most dangerous game you'll ever play, refusing to compete for love that was never rooted in truth. You don't beg, you don't chase, you let go without making a sound even though your soul is screaming. And he hurt you in ways words could never fully explain, and your instinct was to respond, to ask why, 100 different ways. But the truth is, people don't change when you cry. They don't soften because you suffer. So you stop hoping your pain will move someone else's heart. You start building your peace instead, slowly, quietly. And that peace isn't loud, but it is powerful because it says, "I will never again compete in a game where the rules are meant to break me." You exit the race you were never meant to run, and for the first time, your soul breathes. And they expected you to fight for a spot in their life, to prove you were worthy after they tore you down. But you didn't play into that. You didn't perform your pain. You stopped showing up in places where your worth had to be negotiated. You stopped defending your softness. And that choice shook the ground beneath their ego. Because when someone is used to control, the most dangerous thing you can do is take away their audience. You no longer entertain manipulation. You no longer argue with cruelty. You rise quietly, strongly, and the silence speaks louder than any scream ever could. And you stopped asking to be chosen. You stopped trying to be enough for someone who made you feel like too much and not enough all at once. You stopped shrinking just to fit into someone's small idea of love. That's not bitterness, it's rebirth. You learn that the most painful thing is not being rejected. It's rejecting yourself for someone else's comfort. So you made a new promise to never again abandon yourself for anyone. You won't prove your worth to someone who only sees you when it benefits them. You leave the table, and that leaving, that's what sets you free. And it still hurts. The memories come uninvited. You remember how you poured your soul into someone who drank from it and left you dry. You remember the words, the silence, the way love turned cold. But now, instead of chasing what broke you, you sit with the ache. You stop trying to fix what was never meant to be whole. You accept the pain without inviting it back in. You allow yourself to grieve, but not to regress. That is the power they never saw coming. Your ability to feel deeply and still not return to what destroyed you. You are breaking the cycle, and that is a quiet kind of bravery. And there's something sacred about the moment you realize you don't have to prove anything to anyone anymore. Not your loyalty, not your love, not your pain. You stop explaining why you left. You stop justifying why you didn't stay. You stop apologizing for healing. That moment is heavy and holy. It comes with tears, but also peace. You look in the mirror and finally recognize the person staring back, not as broken, not as desperate, but as someone who knows that walking away was never weakness, it was wisdom. And you wear that wisdom like armor now, even if it still carries scars. And they may look at your silence as indifference. They may call your distance cold, but only you know how many nights it took to not respond. How many times you had to remind yourself that staying quiet was not defeat, it was dignity. You carry yourself like someone who chose peace over performance. You don't need revenge. You don't need validation. You just need space from the battlefield that once made you bleed. And as you grow, you begin to thank the silence, not because it felt good, but because it saved you. It made room for your soul to breathe again. And why? You understand now that the game wasn't to hurt them back. It was to never let them make you question your worth again. You stop showing up for people who only see your value when you disappear. You stop shrinking your emotions just to keep peace with someone who thrived on your pain. That's what makes it dangerous, the way you healed without needing to be seen, the way you chose yourself without needing permission. That strength doesn't roar, it whispers. But it's the kind of whisper that echoes in your heart, in your soul, in the places they will never reach again. And this is not the path you wanted. You never asked for a love that ended in silence and self-doubt. But sometimes broken things are the beginning of becoming whole. Sometimes pain is what wakes you up to what you deserve. So now, instead of waiting to be loved better, you love yourself differently, fiercely, softly, and without conditions. You no longer fight for places you were never meant to be. You don't plead to be seen by those who choose blindness. You play a different game now, one that honors your heart, your worth, and your healing. And in that quiet decision, you win everything you once lost. And there's a different kind of pain that comes when you give someone the best of you, and they treat it like it was nothing. It's the kind of ache that doesn't scream. It just sits in your chest like a weight you can't shake. You remember the laughter, the way you gave without hesitation, the way you loved so loudly for someone who only ever whispered back. And then one day, it all turns cold. The ticks slow down. The warmth disappears. You feel yourself becoming invisible in a space you helped build. But instead of begging, instead of asking what changed, you choose to leave. Quietly, completely. And the most dangerous thing you did was not leave with noise, but with stillness. Because he expected anger, he expected tears, he expected the breakdown, but you gave him none of it. You simply vanished from where you once bloomed. And that absence, that's what unsettles everything. Not the yelling, not the accusations, but the peace. The way you no longer tried, the way you no longer reached. That absence haunts in ways your presence never could. Because now he feels the void, and the echo of your silence is louder than any goodbye you could have given. And you were always the one who stayed, the one who made excuses, the one who tried to hold it all together even when it was crumbling in your hands. You swallowed pain just to keep peace. You gave second, third, fourth chances while slowly losing pieces of yourself. But this time, you chose something different. You chose yourself. You walked away not to prove a point, but because your soul couldn't survive in a place that didn't see your worth. And even though it broke your heart, you didn't turn around. You left the door open, but you didn't wait beside it. And at first, the silence is unbearable. You check your phone out of habit. You still think of things you want to say. You still feel the weight of all the love you never got to give. But with every passing day, that silence becomes your shelter. You start to breathe differently. You start to move without explaining your steps. You realize that healing doesn't come from them noticing you're gone. It comes from you noticing you were never truly seen. So you stop hoping they'll come back. You stop rehearsing what you'd say. You let the silence grow until it covers everything they left behind. And there's a shift that happens when you stop waiting for someone to acknowledge your pain. You stop needing them to understand what they did. You stop chasing closure, and it hurts. It hurts so deeply, you wonder if it will ever stop. But then you realize that closure is not something they give you, it's something you give yourself. In silence, in distance, in the decision to stop looking back, you feel the absence more than you expected. But slowly, that absence stops feeling like a wound. It starts to feel like space. Space for you, space for healing, space for peace. And the most painful realization is that someone can get used to your presence while never valuing it. They can enjoy your kindness without ever returning it. They can hold your hand while planning their escape. And you, so full of love, kept showing up. But now, your absence teaches them what your presence never could. It shows them what it means to lose someone who never gave up until they had no choice. And you don't need them to say it. You don't need to hear, "I miss you." You already know. Because no one forgets the one who gave them everything while asking for nothing. And there's power in disappearing from places that made you feel small. There's power in going quiet, not because you have nothing to say, but because you finally said enough. You don't need to scream to be heard. You don't need to stay to prove your love. The silence is not weakness, it's a boundary. It's you choosing peace over pain. It's you no longer handing your heart to someone who didn't know how to hold it. They don't know what to do with your absence. And that's the beauty of it, because now they sit with the emptiness they created. And you start to understand that not every story needs a dramatic ending. Some just need distance. Some just need silence. Some just need you to stop writing the same chapter, hoping the plot will change. And so, you let it go. You let the phone stay quiet. You let the questions remain unanswered. You let yourself hurt deeply and fully until the pain doesn't scare you anymore. And one day you realize that the silence that once broke you is now the silence that holds you. It's the sound of your own strength returning, of your own love finding its way back home. And they don't hear your voice anymore. They don't feel your presence like they used to. But every quiet second is a reminder of what they lost. Not just your attention, but your loyalty, your light, your heart. They thought you'd always be there, but you weren't a fixture, you were a gift. And now that gift is gone. And while they sit in silence, wondering if you'll return, you're out there rebuilding yourself, not loudly, not to prove anything, but because you finally see your own value. And that kind of healing, it doesn't ask permission. It just happens, breath by breath. And you didn't disappear to punish anyone. You disappeared to protect yourself. You stopped showing up in spaces that only drained you. You stopped giving explanations to people who never listened. And in doing so, you created something powerful. Peace. A peace they'll never feel because it comes from walking through the fire without looking back. The absence you created wasn't just distance. It was closure. It was growth. It was the most dangerous, beautiful decision you ever made. Because now you don't just survive, you rise. Quietly, fully, and completely out of reach. There is a kind of healing that doesn't start with forgiveness, it starts with survival. You wake up one day and realize that no one is coming to save you from the pain that was left behind. The apologies aren't coming, the understanding won't arrive. The love you gave so freely isn't being returned, and it hurts more than words can hold. But still you get up, still you breathe, still you decide that this can't be the end of your story. So instead of looking outward, you start searching inward, not for blame, but for strength. And healing doesn't look like smiling right away. It looks like staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m., wondering how someone could walk away from something so real. It looks like holding your chest through a panic that no one else can see. It looks like crying in the shower so no one hears you break. It looks like sitting in silence, surrounded by all the things you once shared, now echoing with emptiness. And even though everything hurts, you stop reaching out. You stop chasing the very thing that shattered you, because somewhere inside, a voice starts whispering, "No more." And you begin to heal the moment you choose to feel it all. Not run, not numb, not distract, but feel. You sit with the ache that tried to bury you. You touch the wounds that have been screaming beneath your skin, and it nearly breaks you. But it doesn't. Because in that moment of complete vulnerability, something opens inside you, something raw, something real. You realize your heart is still beating. Broken, yes, but alive. And if it's still beating, it can still heal. Not for them, not for the past, but for you. And there is no revenge more powerful than peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from pretending you're okay, but the kind that grows slowly, through tears, through heartbreak, through nights when you think you won't survive. It's the kind of peace you earn when you choose not to become bitter, when you choose not to become like the one who hurt you, when you keep your softness even though the world tells you to harden. You start to heal not by fighting back, but by refusing to let the pain define your worth. You stop needing to be seen by the one who made you feel invisible, and you don't need them to acknowledge what they did. You don't need closure from the one who refused to give it when it mattered most. You stop rehearsing speeches in your head, stop writing texts you'll never send. You delete the photos, not out of hate, but because you no longer need to hold on to the memory of someone who let you suffer. You no longer fantasize about the apology you deserve. You stop expecting anything from someone who gave you nothing when you needed everything. And in that surrender, you free yourself from the chains of expectation. And healing isn't loud. It doesn't always look like success. Sometimes it looks like showing up to work with swollen eyes. Sometimes it looks like eating a meal when you have no appetite. Sometimes it looks like saying, "I'm fine," when your voice cracks in the middle. But slowly those cracks let the light in. Slowly the weight begins to shift. Slowly you begin to build a new relationship with yourself. You start tending to your own wounds the way you once tended to someone else's. You learn that you deserve the same love you gave away. And you begin to grow in silence. No announcements, no revenge, just slow, quiet healing. You water your soul with boundaries. You protect your peace with distance. You let the tears come when they need to, but you also let the sun in when it tries. You read, you rest, you pray, you write. You go for walks even when your feet feel heavy. And through every step, you remind yourself that your worth was never tied to who stayed or who left. Your worth is tied to the way you never gave up on yourself, even when you were completely undone. And the pain doesn't vanish overnight. You still miss the moments that felt real. You still catch your breath when a memory hits you without warning. But it doesn't break you like before. You let it pass through you like wind through an open window. You acknowledge it, then release it. Because now you are no longer trying to rewrite the past. You are learning to rewrite yourself, to rebuild in the quiet, to create a new version of you from the ashes of what was lost, not to prove anything to anyone, but to finally be whole within yourself. And one day, you realize you've stopped looking back. The memories are still there, but they no longer control you. The ache still lingers, but it doesn't drown you. You smile again, not because everything is perfect, but because you made it through the fire. You survived the abandonment, you survived the silence, you survived the emptiness. And from that survival, you have birthed something no one can take away, yourself. Stronger, wiser, softer still, but more guarded, not cold, just careful, because now you know your heart is a sacred thing,